The salty smell of the sea mingled with burnt oil and the rust of scrap iron. I stood on the edge of the beach, looking at what remained of the shipwrecked boat, its broken planks creaking in the cold wind. Each wave that crashed on the sand seemed to whisper forgotten names, memories of men who never returned. I felt my heart race. It wasn't just an abandoned piece of wood there. It was a floating cemetery of untold stories, of interrupted lives, of wasted courage. As I approached, I noticed something strange. A figure moved among the wreckage of the hull. A shadow, probably some homeless person or curious fisherman, but something in his posture made me stop. There was tension in his shoulders and in his eyes, or at least what I could see in the shadow of the night. There was fear. My military instinct screamed inside me, an automatic memory of dozens of missions where every wrong step could be the last. Suddenly I heard a crack behind me. A group of young people were laughing, taunting me with cutting words. "Look at the old man! He must be from the time of the paper ships." One of them threw a bottle that bounced on the sand and stopped at my feet. My body stiffened, every muscle alerting me to the imminent danger. I was alone, surrounded by echoes of the past and now by the provocations of the present. The tide rose, lapping at my boots, and the full moon reflected in the wrecked water of the hull, giving an almost spectral appearance to the scene. I could clearly see the peeling paint, the almost erased boat number, and I remembered when I myself sailed under worse conditions, facing real storms, real enemies. Each splinter of wood seemed to ask me, "Do you remember what it means to lose men, to lose friends, to lose everything?" The figure among the wreckage no longer moved, and I could swear it was looking directly at me, as if it knew I wasn't just some old fool. My heart raced, and memories of failed rescues, of dives into seas that swallowed whole men, surfaced. The feeling of helplessness mingled with adrenaline, a familiar, painful, and strangely comforting mixture. Then, a louder crack. This time it wasn't from the rubble, nor the bottle, but from wood breaking under weight. Something was coming towards me. I didn't have time to react. Instinct. I ducked and felt the sand and water splash around me. The figure lunged forward, and for an instant, our eyes met. I could see surprise and perhaps fear, but also respect, a respect that isn't given, it's earned. The wind howled, mingling with the rustling of the waves and the creaking of the boat that continued to break apart. Each sound seemed like an echo of past battles, of shouted orders, of terrifying silences. And in that instant, I realized I wasn't just standing before a shipwreck. I was standing before my own memories, my own ghosts, my own past that refuses to remain buried. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold water invade my boots. The tension didn't lessen. On the contrary, it seemed to increase. I knew something was going to happen there, something that would change the perception of those young people, those invisible observers, and perhaps even my own vision of what it means to be a veteran. The sea continued to crash, relentless, indifferent. And I, standing between the sand and the shipwreck, knew I couldn't retreat. The figure approached slowly, and for the first time I could make out a face. Young, but marked by something. Perhaps fear, perhaps curiosity, perhaps guilt. He spoke a word low, almost a whisper, but it echoed within me like thunder. "Sir." And in that simple sound I felt the world tilt. I felt the tension reach its peak. I felt the exact moment when everything could change. I didn't yet know if it would be a moment of redemption, danger, or bitter remembrance. But I knew that as a veteran, as a man who had seen ships and men disappear into the depths, I couldn't run away. That shipwreck, those young men, that figure, everything was about to teach me once again what it means to face the unknown with courage, even when the heart is heavy with the past. My name is James Sullivan. To many, just another old man sitting by the sea, with wrinkles that tell stories no one wants to hear. But I've been to places where silence was broken by explosions, where darkness wasn't just night but pure fear. Before all this, my life seemed ordinary. I grew up in a small coastal town, the son of a fisherman and a teacher. I learned early on to respect the sea, to feel its mood swings, to understand its secrets. Little did I know that this respect would be tested in ways no boy could imagine. I enlisted at 18. I wanted to serve. I wanted to feel like I was part of something bigger. And from day one, I realized that military life wasn't glamorous. It wasn't honor without pain. It was sweat, fear, and decisions that could cost lives. I participated in missions that most people only see in movies. Ships sinking under attack, storms that ripped wooden beams from structures, and men disappearing without warning. I watched my friends, comrades in arms and in spirit, be taken by the sea, by fire, by miscalculations that seemed insignificant until the fatal moment. There were nights I couldn't sleep. Every sound of the water hitting the ship's wall seemed to scream the names of those who didn't return. Every step on the wet deck was a reminder that death could be lurking, silent and relentless. I learned to value life in ways that no one outside the service would understand. Small gestures, small victories, a safe breath. Everything became a triumph over the randomness of fate. But my story wasn't made up only of battles. I saw camaraderie emerge in the most unlikely places. An outstretched hand in the biting cold, a smile amidst explosions, a friend sharing the little food they had. These moments shaped me as much as the horrors I witnessed. And yet, every victory was always stained by loss. Friends, brothers in arms, disappeared in seconds, and only I remained, carrying memories that could not be shared without pain. When I left active service, I expected to find peace. But the civilian world didn't have the same rhythm, the same intensity. The silence here was different, heavy, almost oppressive. The crowded streets reminded me of the deserts I had crossed, the bombed ports, the ships that sank before my eyes. And the people, they didn't understand. A look of curiosity often turned into judgment, ignorance, or contempt. I carried unseen scars, memories of men who wouldn't return home, of unforgiving seas, of orders I should have followed, but which cost lives. Civilian life pushed me to unexpected places. Sometimes I found myself wandering along the coast, looking at abandoned boats, remembering each mission, each fall, each decision that left deep marks on my soul. These moments connected me to something greater, to the essence of my own existence, to the memory of those who are gone, to the awareness that, even now, there was still something to protect, still stories to tell. And that's how I arrived at that shipwreck. Not by chance, not out of casual curiosity, but because it seemed to speak to me as if it recognized my own history. Each broken plank, each lost rope, each twisted hull seemed a mirror of the missions that shaped me, the losses I carried, and the memories I can't leave behind. The sea will always be the same relentless enemy, but also a silent confidant. And in that instant, before that shipwreck, I felt the weight of everything I was, everything I lost, and everything I still needed to face. I carry with me scars that no one sees, and memories that no one wants to hear. But each step I take, each glance I cast towards the horizon, reminds me of what it means to be a survivor, what it means to be a veteran, what it means, above all, to face injustice, indifference, and contempt without losing one's own dignity. And while the tide lapped at my feet and the wind carried the smell of rust and salt, I knew that story, my story, was far from over. As I surveyed the wrecked hull of the boat, I heard heavy footsteps on the sand. They weren't the footsteps of ordinary onlookers. They were the footsteps of judgment. A group of young people, perhaps teenagers or a little older, were walking toward me. They laughed loudly, casting provocative glances, their voices sharp as razors. "Look at the old man! He must have come to tell ghost stories." One of them pointed to my calloused hands, to the wrinkles that bore the weight of years of battles and sleepless nights. In that instant, I felt something familiar, the contempt of the civilian world. Not for what I had done, but for what I was now, a veteran, a man marked by the past, but invisible to the eyes of those who had never faced anything like it. A louder laugh, and someone threw an empty bottle near me. The sand flew, soaking my heavy coat and boots. The smell of the sea mingled with the acidic odor of burning plastic. My instinct told me to retreat, but my conscience told me to stand firm. And then a young woman approached, holding a smartphone. She started recording, laughing, as if my presence were a spectacle. "Look, he thinks he's some kind of hero." The public humiliation was swift, intense, and cruel. I felt each word like blows, memories of insults I received in foreign ports, of glances that averted when I entered civilian rooms, where my uniform was no longer recognized. But there was something more there, something I couldn't ignore. One of the young men moved too close, his face contorted in defiance. I felt the tension rise, not from physical fear, but from the recognition of the emotional danger, the injustice of being diminished without reason, of being judged without a history. I remembered my days at sea when every decision could save or destroy lives. The difference now was that the threat was invisible, disguised as ignorance, but still capable of hurting. The cold breeze brought back the smell of rust and burnt oil from the shipwrecked boat. Every memory of sinking ships, of men disappearing at sea, of relentless storms, resurfaced. I felt a mixture of anger and resignation. These young men knew nothing of what it meant to fight, to lose friends, to feel the cold salt water seep into our bones while we tried to save lives. But the feeling of being underestimated, ridiculed, was the same everywhere, on the beach, on the ship, or in the city. As the group moved forward, I realized I couldn't just react with anger. I needed to measure my actions, as I always did when the lives of others were at stake. One mistake could turn a provocation into a confrontation, and I didn't want to repeat the horrors of the past. But there was a need to assert my presence, to show that even now every scar had a story, every wrinkle had a memory, every gaze carried respect earned with blood and sweat. Then I heard a low, almost inaudible voice coming from the hull of the boat. "Sir." I looked quickly and saw the figure of the young man who was among the wreckage. He watched me, hesitant, as if he knew something was about to happen. The tension between the young man's provocation and the silence of the sea reached a critical point. I was surrounded, yes, but not defeated. The memory of each mission reminded me, courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it. The initial conflict, then, was not merely physical or social. It was emotional, moral, psychological. It was the silent battle between the veteran who knows the value of patience and respect, and the society that still does not recognize the invisible pain of those who have already lost so much. And at that moment, I realized that something needed to happen, something that would change the perception of those young people, and perhaps even my own vision of what justice, recognition, and dignity mean. The tide rose slowly, each wave whispering stories of loss and survival. The wind cut my face, bringing back memories of storms, of ships setting sail on missions and never returning. I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline mixed with memory, and I understood this would be the test. Not of my muscles, not of my strength, but of what remained of my veteran spirit in the face of the ignorance and contempt of the world I had sworn to protect. They laughed. They laughed as if every word, every gesture of mine was just a joke. Every wrinkle on my face, every scar on my hands, every slow, calculated movement was the target of their scorn. "Look at the old man, he must be afraid of his own shadow." Someone shouted, and the laughter echoed like gunshots in my chest. For a moment I felt the same sensation I felt in distant ports, when the civilian population ignored my presence, when respect wasn't given, but denied. One of the girls, holding her smartphone tightly, pointed at me and said mockingly, "Let's post this, guys, look at the washed-up hero of the sea." The sound of the recording starting was like the silent crack of gunfire. Sharp, cruel, inevitable. People passing by began to look, some curious, others merely intrigued. I could feel their gazes piercing my soul, judging, underestimating, labeling. The young man who approached the hull, the same one I had noticed before, wasn't laughing. He was just observing, but the others lacked that restraint. One of them threw a piece of wood, which ricocheted off the sand near my feet. My hand clenched into a fist, not impulsively, but as a reflex from training, an instinct I'd learned to master in the most dangerous missions. Take a deep breath, calculate the risk, choose the exact moment to act. "Old man, do you still remember how to swim with those tired arms?" Another mocked, mimicking my movements as if age and experience were synonymous with weakness. I took a deep breath, feeling the salty sea breeze mix with the contained anger. Each of their words was a reminder that the world rarely respects those who carry untold stories, invisible memories, internal battles that no one can see. I looked at the shipwreck in front of me, the broken planks, the twisted hull, the fragments of ropes. and destroyed sails. Everything seemed to reflect my own state at that moment. Exposed, vulnerable, underestimated. But there was also something more. Something those young men couldn't see, inside me, beneath every scar, beneath every painful memory. There still existed strength, discipline, the certainty that respect doesn't need to be asked for, it's earned. They continued on, ignoring the quieter figure that remained near the boat. "Has he ever lost someone to the sea? I bet he has," shouted another, laughing scornfully. The pain of those words was sharp, not physical, but emotional. Each phrase carried the weight of public contempt, of judgment without context, of humiliation imposed without pity. I remembered the faces of my lost companions, of when the world only saw statistics, numbers, anonymous bodies that disappeared at sea. And now here, it was just youthful laughter, but the effect was the same. I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. Every fiber of my being remembered years of training, moments when reacting impulsively would mean death, mine or others. I could have given in to anger, I could have fought back, but I knew the real battle wasn't against them, but against their mistaken perception of me. Still, I felt the weight of loneliness. No one there understood, no one there knew what it meant to be a veteran. To carry memories that burned inside, to face losses that time never healed. And then I realized it was an opportunity. A chance to change the course of that situation, to turn the tide of contempt. But for that, I would need precision, courage, and absolute control. Every movement, every word, every look needed to be calculated. The moment of humiliation, as intense as any combat I had ever faced, was about to transform into something bigger, something those young men would never forget. Meanwhile, the sea continued to pound against the hull, each wave carrying echoes of past battles. I could feel the adrenaline rising, mixed with memories of losses, triumphs, and survival. And in that instant, I realized that public contempt wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a lesson, one that I, James Sullivan, veteran of seas and wars, was about to teach. And then it happened. The instant when scorn, mockery, and ridicule were replaced by something unexpected. A heavy, almost reverent silence fell over the group of young people. The young man who had remained near the hull of the boat, the one who had previously only observed, finally approached cautiously. In his eyes I could see doubt, fear, but also a spark of recognition. He said my name, softly, almost whispering, "Sir, you were on that ship?" The question made the air around us vibrate. The other young men exchanged confused glances, not understanding. I could feel the tide of change in the air. Scorn was beginning to transform into curiosity, mockery into attention. I took a deep breath and decided not only to speak, but to act. I began to tell in a few words about a ship that sank during a storm that no one else could imagine. About men who were lost in the icy water, who fought until their last breath. Each word carried the force of memories. Each pause carried the weight of suffering. As I spoke, I noticed something changing in their eyes. Those who had laughed before were now listening to me. The wind, the smell of the sea and rust, the moon reflected in the broken waves of the shipwreck. Everything seemed to amplify every detail of my story. And then, as if the universe wanted to reinforce my narrative, a sound echoed from the destroyed hull. A sharp creak, a plank breaking, falling to the sand with a metallic crash. The scene, which before seemed like just an old man observing scraps of wood, now had the weight of a living memory, of a battle that continued to be told. The young men slowly moved away, some swallowing hard, others almost in disbelief. One of them, who had laughed louder at the beginning, approached and apologized. I didn't know. "I'm sorry, sir." His voice trembled, but there was sincerity. I realized at that moment that their perception had changed in seconds. Not because I wanted to impose respect, but because the truth of the experience is impossible to ignore when told with the intensity of a life lived. The silent figure that had remained on the boat drew even closer, finally helping me observe details I hadn't been able to see before. The twisted hull, broken ropes, scattered wreckage. He seemed to instinctively understand the meaning of each splinter of wood, each rust spot, each detail that only a veteran would understand. For the first time, there was no mockery, only curiosity and restrained respect. The entire group now kept their distance in silence, as if the tide itself had whispered that this old man was not just an ordinary man. I could feel the change not only in the atmosphere, but within myself. The weight of contempt began to dissipate, replaced by something I hadn't felt in public for a long time: recognition. Not the empty recognition of words, but the kind that comes from understanding the sacrifice, the pain, and the real experience. And then came the final confirmation. One of the young men pointed to the tide, to the hull that was still slowly disintegrating, and said, You saved someone here, didn't you?" I simply nodded. It wasn't the time for details, but the simple realization that, at that moment, my past actions echoed in the present, generating respect and admiration, was enough. The turnaround was complete, from absolute contempt to silent recognition, from ridicule to reverence. The wind howled, the sea crashed against the broken planks, and I felt the intensity of memory mingling with reality. What was once only humiliation now transformed into connection, understanding, and respect. The past and the present collided in a moment that none of the young people would forget. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that my experiences, my mistakes, losses, and triumphs had not been in vain. The turnaround wasn't just external, it was also internal. My heart, heavy with memories and invisible scars, felt relief, pride, and the confirmation that even when underestimated, even when ridiculed, the truth always finds its way. And that night, standing before the shipwrecked boat, the relentless sea, and the silent young people, I learned once again that true courage lies not only in facing storms, but in remaining whole in the face of the world's ignorance and contempt. The silence that hung over the beach after the turnaround was slowly broken by soft applause from a small group of people who had discreetly approached. It wasn't crowd applause, but the kind that carries weight, the kind that allows truth without the need for words. I took a deep breath, feeling every muscle relax and every emotional scar receive a validation I had sought for years. The young man who had initially stayed closest to the hull now cautiously moved, looking me in the eyes. "Sir, I'm sorry for what we said before. I see now, Doctor. I see that you really lived through it, that you went through all that ... double quotes." His voice was firm, but carried genuine respect. I felt a pang of emotion. For years I had carried heavy memories as if no one could understand. And in that moment I realized that finally someone truly understood. One of the other young men, the one who had laughed loudest at the beginning, lowered his head and said almost in a whisper, "I had no idea ... we were cruel." "I'm sorry, sir. It wasn't just an apology, it was recognition. It was the assumption that they underestimated something they could uncomprehend without going through what I went through." Each of their words touched a deep place within me, something that hadn't been reached by praise or medals, but only by genuine respect. Meanwhile, the wind carried the smell of the sea and the rust of the shipwreck as if the place itself had appropriated my story. I looked at the wreckage at the gently lapping tide, and felt that each memory that had tormented me during endless nights was beginning to transform into something more. Recognition that I had not only survived, but that my experiences had value, had meaning. The young man who had previously stood silently pointed to the hull. "You saved lives here. It wasn't just a story of a sunken ship, you made a difference. I can feel it." His statement, simple and direct, was more powerful than any medal or formal honor. It was pure justice, acknowledging that the invisible scars, the silent suffering, and the heroic actions counted for more than any external judgment could measure. The group of young people stepped back a little, making space. There was no more mockery, no more provocation. Only looks of respect and, curiously, admiration. I could feel the change in the energy around me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in public for years. For a moment, we were no longer veterans and civilians, young or old. We were simply humans reaffirming the confidence, experience, and weight of a vivid life. I took a deep breath, absorbing every detail. The waves lapped, gentle but insistent. The tide rose, reminding me of the inevitability of time and memory. Each word, each gesture, each look of respect functioned as a kind of symbolic replacement. I didn't try to prove anything, but the world around me finally recognized my story. As the young people slowly retreated, they realized that there was not only recognition of courage, but also implicit learning. The truth, even silent or forgotten, always finds a way to assert itself. Justice didn't come from a courtroom or a medal, but from the genuine recognition of those who witnessed, even silently, what it means to face the impossible and survive. At that moment, I felt a weight lift from my chest. For years, the world seemed indifferent to my experiences, but now, in that inviting place, before a shipwreck and young people who would never forget, justice wasn't just symbolic, it was real. My past hadn't been ignored, my losses weren't empty, and my stories finally had the value they deserved. And then I realized something deeper. True recognition doesn't need to be grandiose. It needs to be sincere. And that night before the destroyed hull and the tide whispering forgotten names, I received the justice I had always sought, not through crowd applause, but through the truth, understanding, and genuine respect of those who witnessed the weight of my past. As I observed the wreckage of the boat, I felt a deep weight fall upon my shoulders, but this time it was different. It wasn't the weight of humiliation, nor the tightness of tension. It was the weight of memories that never fade, of the recollections of the men who are gone, of the missions that shaped me, and of the life I continue to live, even carrying invisible scars. The cold wind touched my face, carrying the smell of salt mixed with rust, evoking memories of storms, rough seas, and the creaking of ships that never returned. I closed my eyes for a moment, remembering faces that time had not erased. There was Tomas, always optimistic, who laughed even when the cold water rose to his chest during night patrols. Samuel, who saved me more than once and ended up lost among waves that swallowed his ship. And so many others whose names I still whispered at night, while trying to sleep without the weight of guilt suffocating me. Each memory was painful, but also precious. Each memory carried lessons that no book could teach. The young man who had previously looked at me with respect remained silent beside me. I could feel the curiosity in his gaze, but also a silent empathy. He didn't need to understand everything, but his presence reminded me that even now, there was still humanity in the world, even in the face of ignorance, cruelty, and indifference. And I realized that my story, told in fragments, could awaken something in him, a perception that courage and sacrifice are not just words on medals or newspaper stories. As the sea continued to pound against the wrecked hull, I began to reflect on my own life. So many difficult decisions, so many moments when death seemed inevitable, so many losses that shaped me. I learned that the war doesn't end when you leave the battlefield. It continues within you, in the silent confrontations of conscience, in the nights when the wind and the sea remind you of everything you've lost. And yet, even with this pain, there was beauty. In the camaraderie, in the courage, in the unconditional loyalty we shared. The silence of the young people, now filled with respect, seemed to amplify my memories. I could feel again the cold of the seawater, the creaking of the deck under tired feet, the smell of gunpowder, rust, sweat mixed with salt. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that my life wasn't just about loss. It was also about resilience, about remaining whole despite the chaos, about preserving the memory of those who were gone, and passing on lessons to future generations, even if silently or unexpectedly. I looked at the moon reflected in the waves, feeling a deep connection between past and present. The shipwreck wasn't just broken wood. It was a symbol of everything I had faced, everything I had survived, of all those who lost their lives without the world caring. Each fragment, each torn rope, each loose plank was a reminder of the raw reality that civilians rarely understand. And at that moment, I felt I could share this pain without fear, and perhaps transform respect into understanding, and understanding into empathy. What it's like to lose so many. He paused, swallowing his words, and I simply nodded. He didn't need to say anything more. The silence shared between us carried more weight than any speech. There was empathy there, born from silent recognition, and that was more valuable than any applause or thanks. The tide continued to rise, but I no longer felt fear or pressure. I felt connection with the past, with those who were gone, with the experience that shaped my life, and with the humanity that could still emerge even in unexpected places. Every breath, every sound of the sea, every painful or joyful memory mingled in that instant. And I realized that my mission didn't end with the war. It continues, teaching, remembering, connecting. At that moment, I felt a strange peace. The pain remained, but it wasn't overwhelming. There was recognition, empathy, and the certainty that, even among the living, my stories would not be forgotten. I, James Sullivan, veteran of lost seas, ships, and men, have realized that the deepest connection comes not from glory or fame, but from shared truth, earned respect, and an open heart to remember and be remembered. The wind shifted direction, carrying with it the smell of salt water and the rust from the broken hull. The tide rose faster than before, dragging small planks and debris toward the sand, and with each wave I felt my adrenaline surge. A shrill sound echoed along the shore, a larger plank of the hull breaking off, spinning dangerously on the water, as if the shipwreck itself wanted to test me. The young men recoiled, frightened, but I remained firm. Instinct, reflexes, and combat experience spoke louder than fear. I knew that if I moved at the wrong moment, something could hit me or worse, put someone in danger. Every muscle in my body was alert, every sense heightened, as on the most intense days when I sailed through storms or faced enemy attacks. The line between survival and disaster was just seconds away. Suddenly I heard a scream, not from the young men, but from the figure that remained near the hull. He had gotten too close, and the strong wave threatened to knock him over. My body reacted automatically. I stepped forward, firm hands, outstretched arms. I caught the young man before the water reached him. I felt the strength of his struggle against the instinct of panic, and I could perceive the real vulnerability of the moment. For the first time, it wasn't just memory or experience, it was concrete action, real rescue. While I held the young man firmly, the hull continued to give way, creaking and breaking under the force of the tide. Each crack seemed like a warning. The danger was real, and any carelessness could be fatal. My heart raced, adrenaline, memory intertwining. I remembered colleagues lost at sea, the moments when death was near, the seconds that made all the difference between life and disappearance. And at that moment, every lesson from the past became a vital tool to save someone in the present. The other young men watched in absolute silence, some trembling, others speechless. Their respect was no longer silent. It was visceral, immediate, born from the recognition of courage in real time. There were no words to describe the intensity of that moment. It was a confrontation with danger, a quick decision, fear and courage coexisting. My military past and my experience as a veteran merged with the present situation, and the difference between disaster and salvation depended exclusively on my ability to act under pressure. Finally, I managed to pull the young man to the safety of the firm sand. He fell to his knees, breathing heavily, but secure. He looked at me with teary eyes, and for the first time I perceived something deeper. Fear transformed into trust, contempt transformed into reverence. The shipwreck continued to break apart around us, but the critical moment had passed. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly dissipate, but remaining alert. The tide and wind continued relentlessly, reminding me that life is unstable, unpredictable, and that courage and action must go hand in hand. As the young man caught his breath, the rest of the group finally spoke, almost in unison. "Sir, that was unbelievable." They didn't laugh, they didn't tease, they didn't mock. They simply acknowledged, perhaps for the first time, that there are experiences that surpass comprehension, that scars and war stories carry more weight than any mockery or contempt could erase. The hull finally broke completely, submerged in the rising tide. The sound was almost symbolic, the physical past crumbling, but the memories, the respect, and the courage remaining intact. The maximum tension had been overcome, but not only by physical danger. The true test had been one of integrity, of action under pressure, of moral and emotional courage. And in that instant, I realized that every battle, every loss, every shipwreck I had faced throughout my life had prepared me for this moment, to demonstrate that the strength of a veteran lies not only in the physical, but in the ability to face chaos with determination, empathy, and presence of mind. As the young man stood up, still trembling, I felt a wave of silent satisfaction. It wasn't empty pride nor vanity. It was the certainty that, despite everything, there was still value in experience, in courage, and in the life that is preserved even when confronted with death and the world's scorn. The climax had passed, but the lessons of that moment would remain forever. When the tide finally began to recede, I could see what remained of the shipwreck. Only floating fragments, torn ropes, broken pieces of wood. But unlike what I imagined, I didn't feel sadness. For the first time in a long time, I felt a kind of relief. Not because the past had been erased, but because the lesson had been passed on, and the memory of everything I had lived through finally resonated with someone. The young people were silent, sitting on the sand, absorbing every detail. One of them approached and extended his hand. I hesitated for a moment, surprised by the initiative, but accepted. The handshake was firm, full of genuine respect. There was no more mockery, no more provocation, only recognition. For the first time in a long time, I felt that my experiences, my losses, and my emotional scars had value in the eyes of others. As I walked along the beach, I felt the cold sand beneath my feet and the salty wind against my face. Each step felt liberating, as if the wreckage of the shipwreck wasn't just wood, but also fragments of shame, contempt, and invisibility that I had carried for years. For the first time, I felt that some of the weight I carried had been relieved, not by oblivion, but by the recognition and understanding of those who witnessed the scene. I looked at the young man I had saved. He didn't speak, only observed me with attention and respect. I realized that something had changed within him, something I might never fully explain, but that would impact how he viewed courage, loss, and responsibility. And I also realized that my actions at that moment had done more than save someone from physical danger. They had transmitted a legacy of resilience, honor, and empathy. In the distance, other curious onlookers began to disperse, murmuring words I didn't need to hear to understand. The tide carried away fragments of the shipwreck, but it couldn't take away the lessons that would remain engraved in the minds of those young people. I, James Sullivan, veteran of stormy seas, shipwrecks, and lost comrades, felt that my mission did not end with the end of the physical battle, but with the passing on of experience, memory, and courage. As I walked towards the beach exit, I reflected on the consequences of what had happened. My reputation among those young people had changed, yes, but more importantly, something within me was transforming. The weight of painful memories found purpose in being shared, and the feeling of isolation that had so often accompanied me after conflicts began to give way to human connection. The experience also made me realize that even after decades of service, battles never truly end. They only change form. From the stormy sea to social indifference, from imminent danger to youthful ignorance, from the chaos of war to the silence of oblivion. But courage and integrity remain, and that is what defines who we are, far beyond visible scars or medals won. As I left the beach, I felt a strange mixture of tiredness and lightness. The shipwreck still existed, but its destructive force had diminished. The respect I had earned, the emotional connection created, and the vivid memory of the men lost transformed the experience into something greater than I could have imagined. The deepest consequence was not in the immediate recognition, but in the certainty that my story, however painful or difficult, had found its place, importance, and meaning. And as the wind continued to blow and the waves lapped gently, I realized that I had fulfilled my mission in a way that went beyond what any medal could symbolize: to transmit courage, preserve memory, and leave a lesson of dignity and humanity for those who did not live what I lived. And, for the first time in a long time, I felt complete. As I walked along the beach, watching the sky darken and the last waves crash against the wrecked hull, I realized that life in fact never ceases to test us. Every shipwreck we witness, whether literal or symbolic, leaves us with scars and memories that can become burdens or lessons. I chose to transform them into lessons for myself and now for those young people who, even without realizing it, received a fragment of what it means to survive, resist, and maintain dignity in the face of contempt and ignorance. War doesn't end when you return home. It continues in our thoughts, in our memories, in the dreams that insist on reliving scenes we would rather forget. I saw friends disappear, ships swallowed by the waves, storms that tested every fiber of our being and every decision we made. These experiences shaped who I am today, and the moral of this story is simple yet profound. True courage is not measured by body size or youth, but by the ability to face fear, loss, and contempt with integrity. Genuine respect isn't given, it's earned. And often, it comes in unexpected ways. Not through medals, honors, or applause, but through the silent recognition of those who witness the truth. Today, facing that shipwreck and those young people, I learned that memory and experience can be bridges between generations, connecting the past and the present, and reminding us that every action, every choice, every moment of courage has an impact that goes beyond what we can imagine. Reflecting on what happened, I realized that true legacy isn't made only of victories, but of survival and the transmission of values. Each shipwreck, each lost friend, each moment of fear faced, is part of a larger narrative that reminds us that life is fragile. Humanity is flawed, but courage and dignity can transcend time. The experience I carry isn't just mine. It belongs to all those who have gone, to all who fought, and to all who still fight so that their voices and stories are not forgotten. Furthermore, I learned that justice is not always formal or immediate. Sometimes it comes silently, in the actions and attitudes of those who witness, in subtle shifts in perception, in moments when contempt is replaced by recognition. True justice does not depend on courts or rewards, but on the real impact of our actions on the world and on those around us. As the sun began to disappear on the horizon, reflected in the gentle waves, I felt a strange mixture of melancholy and peace. The painful memories would remain with me, but no longer as an overwhelming weight. They now carried meaning, purpose, and a message that every veteran, every survivor, every person marked by life has value, and that even in moments of humiliation, danger, or contempt, integrity and courage can transform what seemed like loss into learning, respect, and connection. And finally, I realized something fundamental: war, suffering, and loss can never be forgotten, but they can be shared to teach, warn, and inspire. Every shipwreck, every story of loss, every scar is a reminder that humanity is complex, that life is unpredictable, and that every act of courage, even silent or invisible, can resonate far beyond the moment it occurs. So, as I walk away from the wrecked boat and watch the sea carry away the last fragments, I think, true victory is not surviving external battles, but surviving memory, pain, and indifference, keeping courage, dignity, and humanity intact. And perhaps, just perhaps, those who witnessed it today will carry with them a little of this lesson so that they know that every story matters, every life matters, and that we should never underestimate the strength of those who have faced the impossible. Because in the end, courage is not just about what we do in battle, but about how we live, and remember, and how we allow our experiences to transform not only ourselves but also those who cross our path.